What a week for the Cleveland Cavaliers. And finally, the rest of the sports world has gotten a taste of what Cavs fans have been seeing all year long. On today's episode, we're going to celebrate a week of Cavs basketball with 8 made-up awards. We're going to look ahead to a couple more national TV games, and I've got just the most ridiculous thought exercise to try and decide whether, Jarrett Allen belongs on the all-time Mount Rushmore for Frode centers. We'll see. Hi, and welcome to the Sports Ethos Cleveland Cavaliers podcast. To join the discussion, just use hashtag CavsCast on social media. I'm Zach, your host, and this is your safe space to celebrate and nerd out about your favorite team, the Cleveland Cavaliers. Now, I say nerd out, but you know what I'm talking about. We're talking hoops backed by stats you've actually heard of. As you know by now, I record these episodes on the weekend, so the Pacers game has not happened yet. We're going to be looking at 3 games from the past week since my last recording, in which the Cavs went 3-0, extending their winning streak to 12 games. They got a massive victory and a ton of national attention, so we have a lot to celebrate this week. So let's start with a quick recap before we give out some made-up awards. They started the week on Sunday night at home against the Hornets. This game was never really in doubt, but Charlotte hung around just enough so that the Cavs starters had to play until about 3 minutes or so left in the fourth quarter. They finished that game off with a 115-105 victory. One thing that stood out was that Donovan Mitchell only scored 2 points in the first half, and quite frankly, I didn't even notice. The Cavs were sharing the ball really well, and they were spreading the scoring out, and that just kind of flew completely under my radar within the flow of the game, and they were still up 63-48 at halftime. Now, Mitchell did end up getting like 19 in this game. He was one of 5 Cavs in double figures, which were led by Darius Garland's 25. He only had 2 assists after being a major distributor the week before, so I was pretty surprised that we didn't have a higher assist total in that game from Garland, but they still had 29 assists as a team, which is exactly at their average for the year, which came into that game like top 5 in the league. So I think that just those 2 things in a nutshell, the Donovan Mitchell kind of lack of scoring in the first half and the Darius Garland kind of lack of table setting, it just speaks to the way that they were spreading the ball around kind of all night long. Scoring or shot creation weren't reliant on any one single player or any, 2 for that matter. Then in Wednesday's game against the Thunder, it was super hyped up, and it lived up to every bit of that hype, and I would argue and then some. The Cavs made just a huge statement to the rest of the NBA world, and the immediate shift in national coverage and the narrative around this team following that win has, of course, been warranted, but it's also kind of hysterical. Like, this is the team that we've been watching all year long. We've seen how good they are. Now, everybody else is too. And spoiler, this is not the only thing I'm going to say about this game in this episode, so we're keeping the recap just a little bit short. In the second night of a back-to-back coming off of that game, they had to face off against the Toronto Raptors. Just coming off of an incredibly emotional, what was described as playoff atmospheric win, I would argue, and I think many would argue, and maybe we're arguing with the wall because everybody just agrees, the best NBA game played this year. The Cavs had to play again against a Raptors team that's just not good. They had lost 3 in a row coming into the game. They won 8 games all year. And Donovan Mitchell was not playing in that game. It had all the makings of the emotional hangover, and it almost played out to I call it schedule loss, I guess. Call it like emotional fatigue loss. Whatever it was, like they almost dropped that game. The Cavs trailed after the first quarter. They then tied it up at the half and then gave up 42 points in the third quarter, and we're looking at a 5-point deficit going into that fourth. Thankfully, Darius Garland took over and drug this team to a 6-point victory to extend their winning streak to 12 games. It was not the most comfortable win, especially over a bad team, but that was a game they could have easily let get away from them, and they still found a way to win on the back of Darius Garland's 40 ball. We're also going to talk about that one here in this episode, continuing now as we go into our made-up weekly awards. And we're going to start it with the, wait, you're kidding. He didn't just say what I think he did he? Award for Game of the Week. So, the Cavs played the Hornets. No, of course. I'm talking about the Thunder game. It was the game of the year, as I mentioned, so far in the NBA, and I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I have watched every single game that has been played in the NBA, and I will actually advocate that this has been a very entertaining NBA season kind of across the league in terms of competitive basketball that's being played on a night in and night out basis. We've had a lot of, I think the state of what people are calling parity in the league is real. Like, even bad teams are playing competitively against good teams, and every night we get treated to some highly entertaining basketball. This game was on a different level from like everything that we've seen this year. It was something else. It was just so good. And on a night that Donovan Mitchell shoots 3 for 16 and scores a whopping 11 points against the top team in the other conference, you expect the Cavs to have a long night ahead of them. And your expectations would leave you incredibly wrong. This matchup was hyped to the nines. Leading up to it, ESPN was just going full on promo for this game. And they're getting a lot of credit for that. I saw a ton of people go to X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, social media, to say things, and even listening to like podcasts after the game took place, people saying things like, kudos to ESPN for pushing this thing so hard, and kudos to ESPN for the promo that it's giving this OKC and Cavs game, and it's so great that they've really pushed this game so much, which I agree. It was fantastic that they promoted this game. However, the fact that so many people took notice of that promotion tells me that it was incredibly noticeably different than what has been happening all year long. And that's kind of been the problem. These two teams have been the best teams all year, and we are over 40% of the way through the NBA season. It should not have taken this long for the national media to start pushing the best teams in this way. Regardless, it didn't just live up to that hype that they were pushing. It exceeded it. It was incredible. It had like 8 ties and 30 lead changes. Both teams playing into their strengths, and the Cavs coming out on top after making these massive plays down the stretch by players not named Donovan Mitchell. Perhaps the most crucial play of the game was Evan Mobley, and it was like a designed Kenny Atkinson call of give ball to Evan Mobley, go get us a bucket. And he did it. The big-to-big passing was huge to counter the aggressive defense that OKC was playing on the perimeter, and Darius Garland made a big play down the stretch as well. It had everything you could want from two teams that came and played best at the thing that they do. The top offense against the top defense, number one in each conference. Their records were almost identical coming into the game. Both were on pace for 70-plus wins or whatever ridiculous number. It was easily the biggest test of the season that the Cavs were going to have to date, and a matchup that was going to be tough regardless, but it also features some of the things that have generally been more challenging for the Cavs, and they were able to get it done on their home court. Word from those in attendance, based on the social medias and the vibes in the pods, as I mentioned earlier, is that it was easily a playoff-like atmosphere in the building. I, unfortunately, was not in attendance to be able to give you a first-hand confirmation of that, but it seems like that would have checked out. Based on what it felt like watching it on TV. And all I have to say is that Thursday is going to be awesome. And if this really was potentially a NBA Finals preview, that series could be epically competitive and just highly entertaining. And I would be on board, obviously, because the Cavs would be in it, but just as a fan of NBA basketball, based off of that game, and we'll see Thursday if the sequel is as good as the original. I can't imagine it not being still just really, really, really strong basketball, but based off of what we saw, I can't imagine a matchup in the finals that could be more simply entertaining from just an NBA fan perspective. I really can't. The next award that we are going to give out today is Should the Cavs really have 4 All-Stars award? For Cav of the Week. And this one, I really, really almost gave it to Darius Garland, but I kind of flipped it at the end to Jarrett Allen. Let me just read you some of the box score stats for Jarrett Allen this past week that we are celebrating. Sunday versus the Hornets, 19 points, 11 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 blocks, 9 of 10 from the field. 5 offensive rebounds. Wednesday, against the Thunder, 25 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, 3 steals, 1 block, 9 of 11 from the field, and 7 offensive boards. Thursday against Toronto, 18 points, 15 rebounds, 3 assists, a steal, 2 blocks, 8 of 9 from the field, 6 offensive rebounds. He missed 4 total shots in 3 games where he scored a combined 62 points for this Cavs team. Now, if you don't have your calculator handy, don't worry. I did the math for you. That's 87% shooting on 30 shots. He amassed 18 offensive rebounds over the stretch, and the facilitating. 11 assists in 3 games from a guy who isn't really asked to do that on this team. When you think about typically how they facilitate from a big perspective, that falls on Evan Mobley, not Jarrett Allen. Jarrett Allen is the finisher in that duo the majority of the time, based on the eye test. But this past week, they split that, and Jarrett Allen showed that he is also more than capable of doing that big-to-big passing out of the short roll. And he really stepped up in that way when they needed it most in that OKC game. He only averages 2 assists per game on the season. It was 1.9 actually. And what is 11 across 3 games? That's almost 2. I'm not doing the math on the fly. It's fine. The point I want to get to next is that not only was he doing that facilitating and kind of stepping out of his comfort zone in that way to do it, he did it with 1 turnover. And that actually came in the Hornets game. In the OKC game or Toronto, none. Never gave the ball up. And look, I get it. Any idiot can read a box score. But those numbers are worth celebrating. And might I even say, perhaps all-star worthy? Maybe. Just maybe. Hey. I'm not biased, or I'm pretty biased. But the thing is, like, the major thing that put him in this spotlight for me over this past week is that he stepped up when they truly needed him to. The Cavs' advantage against OKC was size down low, and he extended so many possessions with his activity on the offensive glass, and the Thunder were really good defending the perimeter. Donovan had an awful time getting anything going, and the Cavs countered by leveraging the bigs to facilitate to each other. And that was like the biggest difference in the game. The biggest game of the year. When the lights were the brightest, Allen had his best game of the season by from my perspective. The next award that we're going to give out is the If You Can Dodge a Wrench, You Can Dodge a Ball award for Quote of the Week. And this one came after the Raptors game when Darius was asked if his 40 points in that game, with more of those points coming at the rim as opposed to getting hot from 3, just felt different in any way. And his response was kind of classic. He kind of leaned into the microphone and he goes, 40 ball is a 40 ball. That's what my teammates would tell me, so that's what I'll tell you. And if you watch the clip as a part of Spin Davies' edit, which if you're not following Spencer, you should go do that. His edits are fantastic for this, for like a look inside the locker room. You'll also get this like nice montage of guys like Ty Jerome and Karis LeVert praising him, as well as Kenny Atkinson talking about how important he was in that game, which, spoiler, we'll get into his comments more in this show too. But I just love the confidence that he showed at the podium. It's almost like he's, to me at least, coming out of his shell a little bit this season when it comes to what we're seeing from him with a microphone in his face. I'm not going to pretend that I know Darius Garland. I don't. He seems like a hilarious guy. I would love to know him. Darius, if you're listening to this or watching on YouTube, let's hang out, dude. But he also seems like a really humble guy. And lately, we're getting some confident statements from him about feeling like an all-star, and this quote about dropping 40. And, honestly, to me, this is the kind of thing that I think fans want to see from guys. I know I do. I often think about it with a guy like Ant Edwards, for example. He's a really, really good basketball player, by the way. Just throwing that out there. I know that the vibes for the Timberwolves are polar opposite from vibes in Cavs land right now, because the Cavs vibes are sky high and the Timberwolves are in the toilet. But Ant Edwards is a really good basketball player. But I think a significant reason that he's considered by a lot of people as a candidate for like the next face of the league is his personality. This kind of answer from Darius Garland is showing his confidence through his own personality. And it's just the kind of thing that makes him and the rest of this team, to me, so incredibly endearing. They seem to be having so much fun that it's infectious. And it makes it, honestly, more fun for someone like me to talk about it. Now, the next award that we're going to do is the Brace Yourself for the Main Event. Who's the best? Pac, Nas, and Big. Award for Moment of the Week. And this one I'm going with that take from Evan Mobley at the end of the OKC game. Mikey McNuggets put it perfectly on X that last year Evan Mobley would have shot a fadeaway in that moment. This year's Evan Mobley took it right at Isaiah Hartenstein. he was full on ISO, went right through his chest, and finished at the rim. This wasn't just a moment because of the stakes. It wasn't just a moment because, of the point in the game or whatever. It was a moment because of the stakes, the growth, and the confidence that Kenny had in Evan. In that moment, he put the ball in Evan Mobley's hands and said, "Go get us a bucket." And he delivered. Imagine a scenario over the past few years in Cleveland in this spot. At any moment, really, at when the Cavs needed a bucket. Just imagine a scenario where the ball was not in Donovan Mitchell's hands. Regardless of whether he was shooting well, whether he was 1 for 30, it wouldn't matter. He was going to be the one that had that shouldered that load, that shouldered that burden, shouldered that responsibility when this team needed to put ball in bucket. Donovan Mitchell, go do it. In the biggest game of the year, against the best team in the West, the best defense in basketball, and a just strong defender, it was the Evan Mobley show. And he rose to the moment. The next award that we are going to do is do these have any wheat, sugar, gluten, or dairy in them? That's all they've got in them. Award for Laugh of the Week. And this one, I loved it. Serena Winters, who might have the best job in television this year, getting to be around this team, was able to catch up with Jarrett Allen in the locker room after the Raptors game and ask him the question that's been burning a hole in the brains of Cavs fans all week long. And here is the exchange. Serena Winters asks, "The people want to know what that actually means. Ethical basketball." And Jarrett Allen's response was classic. You couldn't have scripted it in a sitcom. He, without missing a beat, says, farm-raised, non-GMO, organic, free range, ethical basketball. And Serena's response was, "I think we're all still going to be confused." And if you're feeling like you're not in on the joke, just in case, and because, jokes are always better when you have to explain them, here's the cliff notes of how we got here. In the post-game interview between Serena and Jarrett Allen after the Lakers, he used the term ethical basketball to describe the way the Cavs had played in that game on New Year's Eve. After the Hornets game, Mikey McNuggets, who just got a Bleacher Report show about the Cavs, by the way, so shout out to him for that, and you should go watch that show. He asks Kenny Atkinson how he defines ethical basketball. And Kenny about spits out his drink, clearly never having heard such a thing in his life, and was like, what? So now Serena has gone back to the source, to Jarrett Allen, to try to get clarity on the term, and we're all left with the feeling that whatever it truly is, it seems to fall somewhere in the superfood group, I guess. And something tells me that this legend, this running bit, this term of ethical basketball, I actually saw it used on social media in reference to a post about Cade Cunningham or whatever. This thing is starting to spread, and I don't think it's going anywhere. I think we're going to be hearing about ethical basketball possibly for quite some time. This might be the origin of the next just complete buzzword that people start using when it comes to the NBA. It's going to be ethical basketball. And who knows if anybody will be able to define it better than Jarrett Allen. Farm-raised, non-GMO, organic, free-range, ethical basketball. The next award that we're going to do is the dude was the dude for his time. Award for performance of the week. And I could go kind of the easy route and double up on Jarrett Allen because of how great he was against the Thunder, but I'm actually going to go with Darius Garland for this. His 40 against the Raptors came with 9 assists as well. He was plus 18 in that game in 36 minutes in a game that they only won by 6. There were 4 other guys that scored in double figures in this game, but even Kenny Atkinson afterwards said that he felt like it was the first game all year that a single player carried them. And Garland just took this game over and won it for them. He did just a ton of damage getting to the rim, finishing in creative ways, sometimes with like a blow by and getting a layup. Sometimes it took one of those kind of like funky floaters that he does, some wrong-footed finishes. He had the craft on display, and he truly took it over when the team needed it most. In that fourth quarter, like I said, they went in down 5 points, and he scored 14 of his 40. He was 5 of 8 shooting and 2 of 3 from 3 in that quarter alone. He also had 3 of his 9 assists. He had a couple of steals. He was plus 11 in 12 minutes playing the entire fourth quarter. He closed that game out for them. In back-to-back nights, you got the opportunity to see Jarrett Allen and Darius Garland make just massive statements in their All-Star candidacy. And in this one, with no Donovan Mitchell at all, that potential emotional letdown that I mentioned earlier, without their leader to help them navigate that, like, where were they going to go if things went exactly the way that game was going, what were they going to do without Donovan Mitchell? And Darius Garland answered that question by putting the team on his back and extending a win streak to 12 in a row. The next award that we're going to give out is the I'm a fun guy in my voice like Kawhi award for Vibe of the Week. And this one starts with a quote. I still got to answer your question. And we are continuing our Darius Garland show, but I loved this. It was another one from a Spin Davies video, at least that's where I saw it. It's Darius Garland getting asked about whether he thinks that he should be an all-star. And from off camera, before he can really even respond and formulate a response, because he's definitely thoughtful and he is more humble and a little quieter, a little softer spoken, I guess. He's not a loud projecting voice or whatever, but you could tell he was feeling kind of shy about it, visually in this moment. And off camera, you hear Tristan Thompson jump in as like his hype man, just rattling off how he's the only player in the NBA with 49, 40, and 90 shooting splits, and asking what more do you want him to do. And that's when Donovan Mitchell comes in to chime in, and they are going back and forth. And when it's all said and done, they've hyped up their guy, and Darius Garland's like, I still have to answer your question. And yes, of course, we want to hear your answer to the question, Darius. And his quote was, probably one that you heard or saw on social media about how he tries to be humble, but yes, he thinks that he should be an all-star. But then he goes a step further, and he finishes his response by saying that they should have 4 all-stars. And this is just one of a million examples and exchanges like this that you'll see with these guys. They're each other's biggest fans. They're biggest cheerleaders. They're biggest hype men, for each other. And when answering about himself specifically, Darius Garland makes it a point to hype up his guys right back. Not only should he be an all-star, all 4 of them should be an all-star or in the all-star game. The vibes on this team are just so incredibly high. And I just hope that they continue like this forever. Can we get that? For at least as long as someone is willing to listen to me talking to this microphone about the Cleveland Cavaliers, I want the vibes at this level. Please. The next award that we're going to do is going to be kind of quick. It's going to be the, oh no, is that Ricky Vaughn award for 3 of the week. And we are, again, continuing the Darius Garland show with his step back 3 dagger that he hit at the end of that Raptors game. Up to, with about 45 seconds left in the game, Garland has the ball ISO'd on the right side of the floor, and he's got the much bigger Scotty Barnes on him, and he gets him with like a little hesitation move, step back, kind of back at an angle, side to, I don't know how to, it wasn't a side step, it was a step back, but a step back to the side, I guess you would say. The kids probably have a really cool term for that. I just call it awesome, because he buried it and put the game away. It was the perfect cap to put on an outstanding game that, as I mentioned earlier, was the performance of the week by an individual, and really the 3-point shot of the week. That's all the awards that I've got for you this week. If you want to nominate your own, go ahead and use hashtag CavsCast on X or Blue Sky. You can follow the show at EthosCavs, and make sure that you mention the show page if you want me to make sure that I get your idea, your nomination considered to show up on the show. You can also mention myself, at Zach-NBA, if you want to make double sure that I see it. Before we dive into just this silly thought exercise I wanted to do, I wanted to remind you that this show is also brand new, and we need your help to make it grow. So if you could please, at this moment, if you're watching on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. If you're listening on a podcast app, please hit the follow button. Thank you. Now, this is just an absolutely ridiculous topic, but it was kind of fun for me, and I'm going to be 100% transparent for you. This was one of those things where I was trying to go to sleep. I was laying in bed, and this idea popped into my head, and next thing I know, I think I've been laying there for like an hour just sort of tossing and turning and thinking about this thing and not sleeping. So this dumb thought exercise literally kept me up in the middle of the night when all I wanted to be doing was sleeping. And I couldn't. This team stays on my mind. Just rent-free, completely rent-free. Please pay rent sometime. That would be wonderful. So this is this, and I'm going to preface it, okay, with the caveat that this is based off of dudes that like I remember and thought of. If you wanted to do some kind of massive deep dive and find a bunch of names that I didn't think of from like the 70s and 80s, I implore you to do so. I would love to hear your list. I would just welcome it with open arms. For me, this was just a fun, literal thought exercise that I revisited after I finally fell asleep that night. And here's what I came up with. The question, to set the stage was, is Jarrett Allen on the Mount Rushmore of fraud centers in NBA history? And yes, if you thought that I was going through this exercise with Bob Schmidt's voice in my head from Fear the Fro, you would be correct. He was narrating this thought exercise for me, just so you know. He has no idea I was doing it, but alas, here we are. Specifically, centers for this exercise. Guys like Dr. J, absolutely immaculate fro, but not playing center, so not eligible. The first 3 guys, to me, are a given and non-negotiable. Maybe a slight negotiation on one, but it's not negotiable in my mind. The first is Bill Russell. The second is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. These two, absolute no doubters. The third one is Wilt Chamberlain, who I mostly remember with short hair. And that's where I said, non-negotiable one, slightly maybe. Wilt is the one that's slightly maybe, and not because of his sheer dominance, but there are some older photos of Wilt that you can find with a small fro. It's not big like the other guys that are here by default. But if Wilt did have a haircut that was fro adjacent, even, he's going to be on this list because he was just that incredibly dominant. So those were the three. And then I was like, all right, so who's the fourth? Could it be possible that our Cavs this year, in the year 2025, have the fourth greatest center with a fro of all time? Well, let's find out. So the next guy that I thought of historically that could make a claim was Bill Walton. He must have had a fro, right? Like, if he did, he's a shoo-in for this. But I went to the Google images, and I was surprised when I didn't see Bill Walton with a fro in any photos. All I saw was Bill Walton with long hair, really. Like bandana headband style, like curly locks kind of hair. Not big 70s afro hair like my dad had. He looks more like the precursor to Kelly Olynyk. And the only photo that I did find with Bill Walton with a legitimate afro, turns out it was AI generated. So I was left with no real other alternative than to say Bill Walton had long hair. He did not have an afro. Therefore, he is not the fourth member of the Mount Rushmore of froed centers. And those are the guys from kind of the historical days of the NBA that I'm sure that you could find other names that didn't come to mind for me, like somebody like Artis Gilmore, right, who probably does have a case for this fourth spot, but I'm not going to claim to be the aforemost I'm putting afro into everything for this silly thought exercise. I'm not the foremost historian on the NBA, okay? And I don't claim to be. I'm pretty good, but I'm not gonna tell you that I know every single roster and every single dude's playing photo, promotional flyer that had an afro and played center. So maybe there are some dudes that should have come to mind that didn't. What did come to mind became more modern at that point. Ben Wallace, defensive monster, anchored those Pistons teams, spent some time in Cleveland. He's actually on my wall. That number 4 jersey over my right shoulder, if you are watching this on the YouTubes, is a Ben Wallace in Cleveland jersey. Definitely, I thought had a claim to this spot. Can you call what Joel Embiid has an afro? Again, I kind of see as a different, longer hairstyle, not like a traditional fro. But if you disagree and consider Joel Embiid's hairstyle to be an afro, then that's probably his spot. And to avoid being a hypocrite, I want to go ahead and just put the caveat that while I'm not totally convinced that Wilt Chamberlain's hair was necessarily an afro, he is getting the benefit of the doubt. Because Wilt Chamberlain and Joel Embiid, in my mind, are not in the same stratosphere of NBA legend. And therefore, if someone's going to get the benefit of the doubt here. It's definitely going to be Wilt. Joel, not so much. And so, since I don't really see the hairstyle that Joel Embiid is rocking as a fro, then I don't know. I don't know that fourth spot can go to him. Could it be somebody like DeAndre Jordan? He may have been more of a braids guy at times, but he did let it out too. He rocked the fro, and he was a very very dominant and formidable center in the league for a long time. I guess what I'm getting at is how far off is Jarrett Allen from that fourth spot? If you go resume, accomplishments, accolades, of course he doesn't stack up to some of these other guys. Now, for one, they played full careers for the most part, with the exception of Joel Embiid, who's not done yet, and has an MVP to his credit. So yeah, that the resume may not be there. But let me ask you this. Put prime Ben Wallace or DeAndre Jordan up against this Cleveland Cavaliers team, and you have Jarrett Allen on your side. How worried are you about that matchup? Are you at all? I'm just saying. And yes, I know, this is a really dumb exercise, but it was a fun one, hopefully. And ultimately, maybe he's not there yet. Maybe he's not on the Mount Rushmore of Froed centers yet. But let's not close that door just yet. If this Cavs team hangs a banner, perhaps multiple banners, he might just have an indisputable case to go down as a true legend of the game, a legend of the Froed big men. Maybe. Only time will tell. In next Monday's award show, we will be celebrating the moments that tell the story from this coming week that covers the Pacers game that just happened. If you are listening or watching this on release day on Monday, that game happened last night. And so that'll be included. We will have the rematch against the Pacers in Indy on Tuesday, and that one's going to be on TNT. And that one I'm excited about because I'm going to be jumping on the Block the Shot the Stop for the post-game live stream. So make sure that you come hang out with us after that one. Then we've got the big rematch with the Thunder in Oklahoma City on Thursday. That one also on TNT. And then from there, the Cavs will head to Minnesota to take on the Timberwolves on Saturday. And I don't think this is going too far out on a limb when I say the most dangerous game from that bunch. We just talked at length about how the first Cavs-Thunder matchup was the game of the year so far in the NBA. So now the Cavs have to go into their building and beat them again. It's still the best defense in basketball against the best offense in basketball. It's still the top teams in each conference by a pretty wide margin. It's still on national TV. Everything that made that first game as hyped and as great as it was is still there, with the exception of the Thunder win streak because the Cavs broke it, And now there's a layer of revenge on the OKC side. So, and on top of that, there's a level of expectation from the entire sports world who just saw how amazing that first game was. And now we're all here for round 2 a week later. This is a really good representation, too, I think, of playoff basketball for this group in particular. It's an absolute top-level opponent. You get the win at home. Then they get to make their adjustments and see how you respond in a hostile road environment a week later. How will the Thunder try to scheme out that big-to-big passing that just killed them the first time around? And will they be able to do it while still being able to keep the guards in check? And what kind of counters does Kenny Atkinson have up his sleeve, for that defense that they saw? And how is he perhaps going to try to get Donovan Mitchell more involved and maybe in a rhythm early? I, for one, can't wait to find out. And if you made it to the end of this episode, please leave a like if you are watching this on YouTube, or rate the show 5 stars on the podcast app that you're using right now. It would go a really long way to tell those pesky algorithms that we are worthy of being served to people. Next time you hear from me, I'll be chatting with Zach from Across the Cavs about the Cavs All-Star cases. Now that the episode is officially over, go ahead and open your app store. Download the Sports Ethos app for one of the best blurb feeds in the business. You've got Cav players there. You got fantasy tools. You got updates and really good stuff there. Download. Yeah. As always, I'm Zach. Thanks for nerding out with me, Cavs fans.